Thanks for joining us on the program today. During this segment of the program, we're going to spend some time with somebody who is advocating for a convention of the states. And this is a national effort that's been going on. Mark Meckler, who has been on this program before, but it has been a while since we talked to Mark, again has his activist roots sort of in the Tea Party, and is with the Citizens for Self-Governance Convention of the States, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and what that might entail and what that might do and how that might transform the federal government. There are certainly people, some people might say transform, other people might say restore. Certainly there's an effort on the left to transform, and we'll talk a little bit about that with Mark during this segment of the program. But Mark, thanks for coming on today. We appreciate it.
It's great to be back with you.
Well, it's been a while, and I don't think we were talking about the Convention of the States, but maybe we were. How long has this effort been going on?
Well, just about almost 6 years now. In August, it'll be 6 years since we launched the movement. Back then, no one was involved. No one even really knew what Article 5 was or a Convention of States. Today, there are over 4 million patriots involved across the country. The resolution has been passed in 15 states through both houses and a bunch more states through one house or the other. We're pending all over the country right now.
We'll get into the process of creating a convention in a little bit, but talk about Article 5. What does that mean?
Sure. It's something we don't learn about in school. Even as a lawyer, I certainly never heard about it in law school. But Article 5 of the Constitution gives us the methods by which we have the right to amend our Constitution. There are two ways. First is the one that most people are familiar with. Congress, whenever 2/3 of each house should propose an amendment, sends that out to the states for ratification by 3/4 of the states. Mm-hmm. That's how we've gotten all of our amendments so far. The second method inserted by the founders is when 2/3 of the states call for a convention, similar to how 2/3 of both houses have to call. We get into a convention, we debate amendments, we propose amendments, then they have to go out by ratification by 3/4 of the states. And the reason that got put in there very specifically is when the founders were meeting there at Independence Hall and they were talking about this methodology, this way of amending the Constitution, they said, are we so naive that we believe that a federal government that becomes a tyranny will propose amendments to restrain its own tyranny? The Madison's notes reflect that there was no debate about it. They say nin-com at that point, no comment, and unanimously they adopted to give us, as citizens, the right acting through our state legislatures to rein in the federal government by calling a convention of states.
And it seems unlikely that the Congress would do this of their own volition.
No, in fact, we know for sure because you won't find any amendments post-Bill of Rights that restrain federal power. The best examples of that is that huge population segments, over 80% of the American people think we should have term limits on Congress. And it was proposed recently by Ted Cruz. It'll never even get a vote in the United States Senate, which is run by Republicans, right? It's not going to get a vote in the House. So they won't do it. About 74% of Americans think we should have a balanced budget amendment where the federal government can't spend more money than they bring in. They'll never even bring that up for a vote. So if we want to restrain federal power, if we want to return the interpretation of the Constitution back to something like the original Constitution, the only method available to us is a convention of states.
I mentioned your activist roots go back to the Tea Party. What inspired you to get involved with that?
For me, I've always been patriotic. I was raised in a conservative, patriotic family, never engaged in politics until the Tea Party movement began. A guy by the name of Rick Santelli on CNBC did this off-the-cuff rant calling for a new Tea Party movement in America, and a bunch of us decided that was a good idea. I was one of the first people to hold a protest in the country. That was in February 27th of 2009. Then a group of us organized the big one that everybody knows about. That's April 15th, 2009. There were about 850 Tea Parties around the country. 1.2 million people came out. And that's how I just sort of stumbled into political activism. I was a practicing lawyer, gave up my practice, literally went to the verge of bankruptcy, spending all our money helping to grow the movement. Mm-hmm. And now I had an organization called Citizens for Self-Governance that runs the Convention of States for us.
The Tea Party, especially from some folks, generally on the left, was considered to be this great threat to the American way of life. But had you ever faced anything with your involvement with the Tea Party that you have with this effort? Because there's some people that think Mark Meckler is like you're on a par with a domestic terrorist or something.
Well, I'm used to being accused of that kind of stuff because it all started back in the Tea Party movement, but just different enemies now. Back then it was mostly folks on the left that were just very angry with what we were doing. It was a threat to the status quo, that's for sure. We upended a lot of that. In regard to this movement, there are some in what I would describe as the fringe on the right and some in the fringe on the left who use the exact same talking points. So you get groups like, and it's a strange bedfellow, you get groups like Eagle Forum, very staunch right-wing group, defender of the right to life in this country, and the John Birch Society, they describe themselves as the most far-right group in the country, essentially working with and using the exact same talking points as groups like Common Cause, Center on Budget and Policy Parties, La Raza, Planned Parenthood. These are the groups that stand in opposition to convention states. Over 250 of them on the left, and just a few fringe groups on the right.
Well, and the term that you hear most often, especially from the groups on the right, is that this is going to be a runaway convention. If you have a convention of the states, something will happen, and it's going to get out of control, and I guess the infrastructure of the republic is going to come crumbling down.
Yeah, and it's funny, I think people who say those things should look at where those arguments came from. That argument originally came from Chief Justice Warren Burger. He was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court in 1973.
No relation, by the way. He was BU and I'm BE. So.
That's correct.
There you go.
And he led the way, signed on to Roe versus Wade, and the reason he wrote that, he wrote a letter saying we would lose our beloved Constitution, is because he was being asked about the idea of overturning Roe versus Wade by a convention. So, of course, he was opposed to that. And then you had folks at Harvard and Yale were enlisted professors, liberal professors, to write articles about the runaway convention. And that comes all the way to the modern era. 2 years ago, on Good Friday, 230 of the most radical leftist groups in America, every leftist group you can think of, a bunch of them I already named, including all the public employee unions, SEIU, AFL-CIO, also groups like the ACLU, the NAACP, La Raza, Planned Parenthood, etc., all signed a press release saying that this was a horrible idea and that a convention of states we were going to lose our beloved Constitution. So you've got this weird juxtaposition of these fringe groups on the right, far-right groups, very small in number but very loud, opposing convention of states, and they're allied with and essentially walking in lockstep with these radical leftist groups.
I'm always, I wonder where we are with the Constitution these days, as much as it has been interpreted so much out of what it was originally intended to do, it seems to me anyway. So where are we with the Constitution in this country?
I think that's a great question, because a lot of these folks who oppose what we're doing from the right, they're worried about we're going to destroy our Constitution. I'm looking at, sitting on my desk right now, something I recommend everybody order if they feel like spending $130 on the federal government. From the government printing office, you can order what they refer to as the official Constitution of the United States of America. That's what it says on the spine. The latest one is the Centennial Edition. 2,738 pages. It weighs almost 10 pounds with a supplement that's over 3,000 pages.
Take your vitamins, holy cow.
Yeah, exactly. I can't even travel with it. It's just too heavy. This is the Constitution under which the federal government operates, not the one that you and I know and love that fits in our pocket in a small pamphlet.
Yeah.
And so that's the state of the Constitution today. And when folks say they worry about the Constitution, they're defending it, that's the one they're defending.
Is yours a pushback against the courts? Is your group a pushback against the unwieldy ever expanding bureaucracy? What is it a pushback most against?
I think the simplest way I can put it is it's a fight about who decides in America. Today we have all of our important debates and all of the big political fights in Washington, D.C., and they like it that way, by the way. It's easy to divide the people and control the people. They can put us left, right, conservative, liberal, religious, non-religious, and have those fights on a national scale, the underlying premise being Washington, D.C. will make the decisions. The reality is we should be making the decisions. Who decides should be answered, we, the people back in the States, us privately at home, private citizens, private entities. So this is primarily a jurisdictional fight, but that does involve all of what you discussed. It's the courts have overreached their jurisdiction, and the courts have given too much power to the federal government. They've interpreted expansively the powers of the federal government. The federal government itself, through Congress, has taken far too much power. Administrative agencies have overstepped their constitutional bounds. And so it's really a pushback against all of the above with the theme, who should be making the decisions in America.
I've been following what Mark does for a while, and I've been following the whole debate over the convention. But Mark was brought to my attention again because of an email that I got having to do with a piece of legislation that was being co-sponsored, which is something that I think you like, Mark, between Ted Cruz and AOC.
Yeah, I actually love this, and I got to give credit where it's due. This comes from Ocasio-Cortez herself, and she said we should put a ban on people who go to Washington, D.C., get elected to office, and then leave office to go lobby. We should ban that practice. And I've long said this. I completely agree with this. It's corrupt by nature. It corrupts the essence of our very system of representative democracy. So Ocasio-Cortez proposed this ban. Ted Cruz jumped in on Twitter and said he would support the ban. He would support a lifetime ban, and he always has. And so now the two of them are working together on this. We're seeing other Democrats and Republicans jump in. It's going to be a heck of a fight because recent survey just showed that about 60% of folks who leave Congress go to work for lucrative lobbying jobs on Capitol Hill. So this is going to be a big fight, but I think it's an important fight, and I'm really glad it's a bipartisan.
It's the government, the federal government, has just gotten so much bigger. The bureaucracy has gotten so much bigger, and unfortunately, Congress does more to support it and feed it than it does to make any attempt to control it. And to the point of that legislation, as a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago we had Jim Greenwood on the program, and it happens to be somebody I like, a former congressman from Bucks County. But he left Congress to take a job as the head of BIO, which is the trade organization for the biotech industry. And, well, he's making a small fortune now. So I don't think he's a bad guy because of that. But it's the kind of thing that I guess I wish it were something. I wish he were painting houses instead.
Hey, look, it doesn't make them bad people because they take opportunities that are available to them. I mean, human beings, I like to describe us as incentive machines.
Yeah.
If you put an incentive in front of us and show us we can provide great wealth for our families, then people are going to do that. And there's nothing illegal or unethical about what he's doing. I don't like it because I don't think the system should allow it. And so what we're saying is let's take the incentive away from good guys like him to do that kind of stuff and that kind of work. And we do that by banning this revolving door. I would say that, and having spent a bunch of time in Washington, D.C., this is the most insidious form of money in politics. People complain about money in politics. It's not the direct giving that's the problem. I don't mind that, actually. What I mind is a lobbyist who has a relationship with a legislator knows that relationship over time, the legislator knows it could potentially lead to a multi-million-dollar career for him or her if they're cooperative with the lobbyist. And like I said, human beings are incentive machines. We're going to be nice to lobbyists if we know they control a multi-million-dollar future for us.
When the currents are all moving in the same direction, the water is fairly tranquil. Not necessarily, I mean, it's not dangerous, but it's fairly tranquil. Now, when you've got currents that are moving all over the place, that's when the water is obviously rough. And a lot is being talked about with all the Democratic presidential candidates that are out there. About everything from free tuition to free health care to free whatever, guaranteed jobs in some cases. So this is being defined. Really, the other side of that is sort of where you folks are at, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think all of those fights are important, and we should always engage. I never want to discourage people from engaging. We have a base political obligation as citizens to engage in the political process, to vote. I would argue even more to work for candidates, to give money to candidates that believe in what we believe. We have an obligation to do that, but that's the minimum. What I would say is that system now has failed us, and we've created structural breaks in that system, and so it's time for us to get in and repair the system. You know, if you have a problem with your car, you have a mechanical problem with your car that's preventing it from working, you can keep putting gas in it in a hope that it fixes itself, or you can go to a mechanic and you can fix the structural problems. And the whole idea of a convention of states is that the structure has been broken. The federal government has way more power than it's ever intended to have. There's all kinds of reasons for those structural breaks, but we need to get in and fix the mechanics before we can expect a good result out of the system.
But certainly among the Democratic presidential candidates, it is, I guess the term is doubling down or whatever, a multiple of doubling down in terms of the challenges the federal government has now, and they want to go so much further down that road.
Yeah, they do, and they're appealing to what I would argue is a very small portion of their base. Polling shows it's about 20% of the base. But it is also the most aggressive and active and excited portion of their base. So that's why they're appealing to it. And I have to say, I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me is the majority of people who believe in socialism, and their polling shows it's about 37% of the American public now. It's way up. When asked what socialism is, what does it lead to, what kind of system is it, they believe that it creates a smaller government and lower taxes. That's just not the case.
Yeah.
It's never been the case in all of human history. The system of socialism is not designed to work that way. So this is not about theory versus practice. In theory and practice, it's designed for a larger government and higher taxes. They don't know that because they've been misled by our educational system since the 1960s. So they're not to blame. But it's good to know they don't support real socialism. When they hear about what socialism really is, they actually don't support it.
So we've had a wide-ranging conversation here, but give me the mechanics, and you talked about, the approval of the states and getting states to pass the resolution for a convention, but how would it work? Who would be at this convention? How would they get there? That sort of thing.
Sure. So mechanically the way it works is 2/3 of states have to submit applications or resolutions to the federal government requesting a convention of states. So that's 34 states. Today, 15 states have already passed it. I expect we'll get at least a couple more this year. We'll be halfway there. Once 34 states pass the same resolution, the states send delegates. How do the states choose their delegates? Well, this is one of my favorite parts because it's purely federalist. I believe in our federal system. Every state will decide how they want. They can send as many delegates as they want. The legislature will decide what their qualifications are, who those people are. I think they're going to send fairly large delegations. Each state gets one vote in convention. They go to convention. The only things they can talk about in convention, anything that would impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, anything that would impose term limits on federal officials, that would be Congress, the courts, bureaucrats, staffers, and anything that would put scope and jurisdictional restraints on the federal government, which my opinion is the most important, telling them what they can and can't do. Things like can't be involved in education, can't have the EPA, can't have the Department of Energy. States have all of those things. You don't need the federal government involved in those things. In convention, the states would debate what are appropriate amendments. When 26 states agree on an amendment or a slate of amendments, they send those out to the states for ratification, and it takes 3/4 of the states or 38 states to ratify anything.
So it would be a restructuring of what government has become.
Yeah, and I would argue it would be a restoration of what government was intended to be. Mm-hmm. The entire purpose of our Constitution primarily was a jurisdictional purpose. It laid out which branches of government have what power, and it was pretty darn clear. It was certainly clear from the Federalist Papers what the founders intended, and the courts especially have largely destroyed this. Congress has participated, presidents have participated, but the prime culprit is the courts.
What states have ratified it? Mention most of them. I know I'm asking off the top of your head.
Yeah, I mean, so we started early on: Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas this year, Utah, and Mississippi was this year as well. Alaska has also approved it. Indiana. So it's pretty much all over the country. It's kind of hit and miss who's approved it and who's not approved it. But we're active in all 50 states right now.
So when a state approves it, does it stay approved, or does that lapse at some point, or how does that work?
Yeah, states can put what they call sunset clauses on it. Most states have not chosen to do so, and so when they toss their chip into the ring and say, we're for this, it stays there until they rescind. They always retain the power to rescind. They can do so at any time if they feel like the political climate has changed or things are different in their legislature. But generally, they stay on the books until we get 34.
So this has to come, I'm guessing, more likely to come from conservative states as opposed to, like, California or New York.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, California and New York like centralized government power. They shouldn't, but they do. Here's why they do. They're what I describe as cartel states. And so a state like California, Illinois, New Jersey, or New York, these are heavily regulated states in the state. And one of the things they don't like is for example, a state like Texas that's not so regulated, or Florida that's not so regulated, they have a competitive advantage against states like New York or California. And so New York and California get together in a cartel, and they ask the federal government to overregulate everybody so that they have an equal playing field. And so, yeah, I agree with you. States like California, New Jersey, New York, they're much harder to get to participate in this process. But we're not giving up. We're organizing in all those states. There's something playing against that right now, which is the folks in those states really don't like Donald Trump. They don't like conservatives in Washington, D.C., and so they're thinking it might be wise to push back against D.C.'s power as well right now.
Evil, that was a Freudian slip, I think.
Yeah, almost intentional, because I do think it's evil. The way we've restructured the country is certainly counter the philosophy of the founders. It's not found in any of our founding documents. It's really not part of our history, but it is something that Marxists have intentionally been trying to insert into the American ideal for as long as there's been Marxism.
So if people are interested in the movement, what do they follow you?
Go to conventionofstates.com. Everything we've talked about today is there, and a lot more in more simplified fashion, and then as deep as you want to go. Sign up, sign the petition. That petition will go to your state legislator, let them know you're in support. And then I would say take the next step and volunteer. Get involved, because there are 4 million. That's not enough. I think we need to get to 34 million to get this thing done. So it's going to be up to you guys to save the country at conventionofstates.com.
All righty. Mark, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Tom, great to be with you. Thanks for your time today.
Go to conventionofstates.com, press the button, sign the petition. More importantly, get 10 of your friends to do the same. When you sign the petition, then that sends a letter to your state legislator. You go on the list in their district as a supporter. We deliver those lists to the state legislators. It means something to them.